Okay, so magandang hapon sa lahat, ano? And again, welcome sa another lecture on history of Africa. And this time, we'll talk about the second module, which is African geography. So, as mentioned dun sa naunang video lecture, there are so many interesting things about Africa. But for this one, for this video, we'll talk about the physical and human geography of the very interesting continent. And again, recap of a few information na nabanggit natin last time. Africa covers around 1/5 of the total land surface of our planet, and this is the second largest continent next to Asia. And as mentioned, meron tong mga known borders, na mostly ay bodies of water, which are which are the Atlantic Ocean, Mediterranean Sea to the north, Red Sea and Indian Ocean sa east, and you have the Atlantic and Indian Ocean sa southern part. Now, let's talk about the fast facts about the physical geography of Africa. Its total land area is 13,365,000 square kilometers with a population of 1,393,676,444. No? That is the 2021 data, no? And which makes it the second most populous continent in the planet. Again, next to Asia. Its nominal gross domestic product is $2.96 trillion. And again, there are 54 sovereign countries na part din po ng United Nations. Now, focusing on the very interesting physical geography of Africa, there are a lot of things to unpack. Okay? First thing, Africa is equally cut into half geographically by the equator, no? So, which makes the continent possess a very tropical like conditions, no? So largely it's tropical, no? Then on its other parts, there are large or vast plateaus with varying elevations, no? It's also known for having narrow coastal strips, mountainous regions, and meron pong kinikilalang 8 major physical regions ang Africa. So, ito yung 8, na kino-consider na physical regions ng Africa, geographically. Okay? So, you have the Sahara, which pertains to the region where the desert is, no? Sahel, yan yung border ng Sahara. Ethiopian highlands, referring to the mountainous areas of the continent, mostly nasa may eastern portion. Savanna, which are grasslands. The Swahili coast, isang very narrow strip coastal line. Rainforest, yan, there are sections na napakagubat, sa Africa. You have the African Great Lakes, something you can find sa southeastern portion ng continent, kung saan almost next to each other yung mga malalaking lawa, and the southern Africa, or southern Africa, yung physical region na medyo distinct siya sa rest of the African continent. This is not to be confused with the country South Africa, it's a different thing. Okay? Yan, so here you can see dito sa mapa natin may mga patches, ng region sa Africa based on the ecosystem. You have the temperate steppe, subtropical rainforest, ayan, represented by that lush green color. The Mediterranean region, nasa mini northern tip yan. Monsoon forest, arid desert, xeric shrubland, dry steppe, semi-arid desert, grass savanna, tree savanna, subtropical dry forest, and tropical rainforest. So, observing it, most of the tropical rainforests are concentrated sa may central part where you can also find the equator, which would make sense because in a way it has similar conditions, sa Southeast Asian countries na almost situated then near the equator. Then just right next to the tropical rainforest, yung mga yung mga tree savannas, no, na laganap din sa continent. Okay, you also can see a grass savannas, no. But very distinct po yung arid and shrublands, no, na mostly ay mas malapit sa Saharan region. And not surprisingly, itong area na to also possess, no, I mean in the same region, where Middle East is located, almost same sila ng conditions, again because of its location. So isa-isahin po natin itong mga physical regions, no, starting with the Sahara. Okay, so let us first define what is a desert, no. A desert is any barren land, no, regardless of the material. So it's a misconception to think that all deserts should be sand deserts. That's wrong. So again, where there is lesser vegetation, lesser greeneries, you can basically call it a desert, no? And while Sahara is the world's largest hot desert, the largest desert, no, in the planet is the Antarctican continent, because technically it's a desert where you cannot see any vegetation, as it's all purely permafrost, no, and of course layers of snow. So ayan, I hope I made things clear. So again, back to Sahara. It's the world's largest hot desert, covering 8.5 million square kilometers, 3.3 million square miles, about the size of the South American country of Brazil. So imagine how big it is. Defining Africa's northern bulge, the Sahara makes up 25% of the continent. No? And despite that, no, there are a lot of countries situated in the Saharan desert. But as you can see, the more that you get to the center of the desert, the lesser people you should expect. So again, the conditions are not very conducive for settlements. Now, it is believed that Sahara used to be a seabed, no? It used to be a part of the ocean, then naging tropical rainforest din siya, but due to tectonic plates then, as well as the shifting plates, the locations, no, ng ating mga uh, ng ating mga plates, no. Syempre nagbago din yung situation ng Sahara, and with all other factors considered, ayan, it has now become the desert that we know it today. Just sitting right next to the Sahara is the Sahel region, no? Sahel is mostly, conducive, no, for settlement, no, compared to Sahara. Actually, madaming tao dyan sa Sahel. And it's a narrow band of semi-arid land that forms a transition zone between the Sahara to the north and the savannas to the south. It's made up of flat, barren plains that stretch roughly 5,400 kilometers, 3,300 miles across Africa from Senegal to Sudan. Yan. So as you can see, this is how a Sahel looks like. So yan, tama naman, no. It's a transition area. So from a very hot barren desert, magkakaroon ka ng onting vegetation until you come to the part of grassland savannas, no. Ayan. But unfortunately, the Sahel region is under threat as the Sahara Desert is increasing in size, no? So ito po yung tinatawag nating desertification, where areas surrounding a huge desert is actually being engulfed, no, by the desert dahil nag-expand yung sand, nagiging less arable yung land, no, which also kills other potential vegetations, no. So which desertifies the soil, makes it not conducive for planting, and eventually it becomes part of the desert itself. That's why in the recent years there has been the project called the African Green Belt, where they plan to make a forest, no, to stop Sahara from growing, and they plan to build the strip here, and it's actually ongoing, no? So nire-reclaim nila yung lupang kinakain ng Sahara Desert, no? Para ma-push back yung disyerto. Kasi if they do not do that, lives will be at stake, no? Incomes will be at risk, and of course, yung source of income ng napakaraming mga mamamayan na already ay nasa poverty na might be in total danger. All right, moving on. So, we now go to the Ethiopian highlands, no? This valley cuts through the Ethiopian highlands from the southwest to the northeast. The Ethiopian highlands are home to 80% of Africa's tallest mountains. Yan. So, nabanggit ko kanina, uh, it's the region of Africa where tall mountains are located. No? So, again, it's a different landscape. Then you have the savanna, the grasslands, no, cover almost half of Africa, more than 13 square kilometers, or 5 million square miles. These grasslands make up most of Central Africa, beginning south of the Sahara and the Sahel and ending north of the continent south of there. So basically, savanna is it's not really barren. It's a grassland, where many wildlife animals can be found, no. But it's very much different from rainforests where there's a clump of vegetation. Mostly savannas are flat and bilang lang yung mga punong nag-exist. All right. So next to savannas are the Swahili Coast. No? Swahili Coast stretches about 1,610 kilometers along the Indian Ocean from Somalia to Mozambique. The nearby coral reefs and barrier islands protect the coast from severe weather. What makes the Swahili Coast very much distinct, no, from other coastal regions of Africa is the fact that this is where Africa's rich marine uh, ecosystems are found, no. So as mentioned, it acts like a Great Barrier Reef. So basically, there's the existence of large reefs of corals, and definitely this greatly contributes to the livelihood of those living near the area, na mostly ay nakarely sa fishing. Then you have the rainforests, mostly found in the central states of Africa, no? Namely Congo, yan, sa Guinea, Nigeria, ayan, other parts of Angola, Zambia, Tanzania. So dito makikita yung mga native rainforest ng Africa, no? And yun nga, 80% of today's Africa's rainforests are concentrated in this region, no, known as Central Africa. And one reason why the rainforests are concentrated here is, aside from the fact that it's near the equator, ang pinaka main source of water, no, ng rainforest na to, yung Congo River Basin. Now, you have the African Great Lakes, comparable to the Great Lakes of Northern America, no. So here you can see large patches, no, of inland bodies of water, no, sitting right next to each other, that makes up a very interesting portion of the continent. So the Great Lakes are located in 9 countries that surround the Great Rift Valley, as the African continent separated from the Arabian Peninsula. Large deep cracks form in its Earth's surface. These cracks later filled with water, and yan. Yun na po yung reason bakit there are Great Lakes in the continent. No? Again, another factor din, no? Yung pagiging great ng mga lakes na to ay yung lalim ng bed ng lakes. And finally, you have Southern Africa. The region of Southern Africa is dominated by the Kafval Craton, a shelf of bedrock that is more than 2.6 billion years old. Rocky features of Southern Africa include plateaus, mountains such as the Drakensberg Range. So what makes Southern Africa distinct from other regions is, again, it's mostly rocky, no? And the climate here is very much different from the rest of the continent, no? It is also the region where there's relatively considerable winter in a sense, no, dahil to the northern part of Africa, dahil malapit sila sa Mediterranean, no, you get to have this Mediterranean weather or climate, no, that is not really close to how cold winters could be dito naman sa Southern Africa. Now, furthermore, okay, talking about its geography and the climate, no, yeah. Africa is considered to be the most tropical of all continents. And while sinabi natin earlier that, Africa, one common misconceptions about the continent is that it's entirely hot, no? Ito lang naman po ay true for the areas near the Sahara, no? And sabi dito, the climate south of the equator mirrors that of the north of the equator. Kaya there's really a large portion na mainit, no, sa Africa. But then again, it's not entirely similar to how hot it is in the Sahara. Yan. Now, but as the northern half of Africa's shape makes it bigger, maritime influence is lessened, no? And it has resulted in the large desert Sahara in the north and a much smaller one, Kalahari, in the south. Ayan. So again, the lack of gaps, no, in the continent when it comes to bodies of water, kasi again, it's a huge chunk of land, and yun daw yung reason bakit hindi possible yung yung activity ng maritime influence, which would contribute, no, to the existence of tropical depressions, no, frequent precipitation, ganyan, yung rain levels. Kaya po may disyerto sa north. And meron din sa south, but it's not as big as Sahara. The shape difference of Africa also makes the southern Africa cooler than the northern section of the continent, thereby making East Africa more favorable for European settlement than West Africa. Zambia and Niger are both located on latitude 15 degrees from the equator, but Niger is warmer. Yan, one important note, no, historical note yan, kung bakit mas na-colonize, no, yung East Africa, no, earlier than Western Africa. Kasi nga po, again, climate has something to do with it. And again, when colonizers find lands where they could establish their colonies, importante din yung dapat adaptable yung area for them as well, no. The climate also makes the continent a common ground for environmental diseases. Again, ayan, perfect recipe for various insect to human diseases. Halimbawa, yung tropical rainforest plus yung climate, no, that's very favorable for the existence of such diseases. So in the history of Africa, napaka-prevalent din po ng mga environmental diseases na nangyari, no? So here we have a collage of the notable geographic formations of Africa, no? So as you can see, it's very diverse, no? They have a very good source of water, bodies of water. You have the Nile, the Swahili coast, no? You have the savannas, the grassland, the very beautiful Sahara, and of course you have the African rainforest. Now, moving on sa human geography naman, let's try to extract where the term Africa originated, no? So, one plausible claim is that Africa came from the Egyptian Afu Ika, which refers to the motherland, referring to how they were able to build that very high civilization in the Nile. Okay. Another claim is that it came from the Greek Afraik, no, which means an area without any cold. So again, referring to its very hot climate. Another claim is that it came from the Latin Africa, Africa referring to term sunny or maaraw, no? And when you put all of these together, these are the common observations that probably people before have observed about Africa, and so they just came up with simple ways of referring to the continent given these very observable conditions. Africa is also known to be the continent with the most countries, having 54 states, way less than the very big Asia. Yan. So, ang laki-laki ng Asia pero mas kaunti po yung states niya kumpara sa Africa. Now, there are a lot of interesting things about Africa, specifically on the human geography. Number one, Africa is known as the site of prehistoric migrations. That's why it's often called the cradle of humankind, because of the migrations of the early modern humans from the continent to the rest of the globe. Dito din sinasabing nagmula yung Bantu migration. Ayan. Another important series of migrations 2,000 years ago. This is also where the African slave trade of the colonial period occurred. So that's another major migration, kasi itong slave trade na to yung magiging reason bakit may mga African descendants na makikita sa American continents, sa North and South, sa Caribbean, and also in Europe. Yan. Africa was also home to ancient civilizations, with Egyptian civilization being the most well-known in history. So yan, usually when we tackle the first civilizations, you talk about Sumer, you talk about Indo-Harappa, you talk about Yangtze, Huanghe in China, But of course, who could ever forget the Egyptian civilization, which was established along the Nile River. Yeah. Today, there are 6 major groups based on the language families in more than 20 ethnic groups in Africa. Very diverse, very rich culture. So ito po yung yung 6 categories. So you have the Afro-Asiatic. Yan. So you can find them mostly sa northern portion ng Africa, Nandiyan yung mga Hamitic, yan yung mga Berber, Cushitic, Semitic peoples, Ethiopian Arabics, and yung mga Chadic. You have the Niger Congo, yan. So mayroong Niger Congo A, Niger Congo B. Mostly andito sila sa central and western portion, as well as the lower central portion of the continent. And so you have the Bantu, the Guinean people, the Western Bantoid, Central Bantoid, Eastern Bantoid, and the Mande. Meron din po tayong mga Nilo-Saharan. Ayan, so Nilo referring to the Nile, So close to Egypt. Ayan, so it's again a different ethnic group, you have the Nilotic, Central Sudanic, Eastern Sudanic, the Kanuri, and Songhai. Have the Khoisan, which you can find sa Southern African region. The Austronesian, ayan, ito yung mga kamag-anak natin, Filipinos. The Malayo-Polynesian, na matatagpuan mostly sa Madagascar, Malagasy. And you have the Indo-European, okay? Actual white Europeans have settled, in Africa, and yung mga succeeding generations ay dito na lumaki at doon na lumaki at doon na pinanganak. Okay, in terms of population, ito yung mga pinaka madaming ethnic groups, pinaka dominant. You have the Maghrebe sa North Africa have 100 million. Hausa, 78 million. Yoruba, 40 million. Oromo, 35. Igbo, 34. Amhara, 22. Nilotes, 22. Akan, 20 million. Fulani, 20 million. So basically, dominating ethnic group yung mga taga Maghreb, no? Mostly Northern Africa. In terms of religion, Africa is dominated by two major world religions. You have Islam and Christianity. So as you can see in this map, uh, yan, the green portions, no, represents those who are part of the Sunni Islam uh, religious group. Yan. Tapos yung blue, no, you have the darker blue and the lighter blue. You have Protestant Christianity and Roman Catholicism. And certain portions, ayan, very unique nung Ethiopia where Oriental Orthodox is practiced, no? And you have Hinduism in certain portions, specifically in Mauritius, yan, this island, no? Kasi most of its inhabitants are of Indian descent. And you have the traditional beliefs, no? Mostly in Madagascar, no? Makikita. In terms of age demographics, relatively African population is very young. Okay? So, median age, ayan, no? Teens, 20s, 30s. So, larger portion of the continent are composed of teenagers, ayan. Tapos, sa Northern and Southern Africa, 20s naman, no? And you can rarely see states where the median age is on its 30s. Okay, now in terms of poverty incidence, ayan, many Africans are still living on less than $1.90 per day. And sadly, many of these countries are here, no, dito sa central portion. No? And as it gets maroon, yan, the more na mas mataas yung incidence of poverty. Okay? So napakaming factors explaining why this is a phenomenon. No? But in different parts of the region, the continent rather, meron naman tayong mga mabababa yung poverty rate nila. Like Morocco, Algeria, and Egypt. You also have Gabon. But cases are much worse in Democratic Republic of Congo, yeah, Madagascar, okay, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Guinea-Bissau, yeah, and the Central African Republic. The rest are ano naman, median. However, despite that, no, on the rise ang maraming African states, especially in terms of their economy. And here we are looking into the map of the 10 largest economies in Africa. So the country with the largest economy in Africa is Nigeria with an economy worth of $450 billion. Yan. So mostly owing to to a lot of industries na nag-exist sa Nigeria. Fun fact, Nigeria has its own version of Hollywood, and they call it Nollywood, no? Which is also form of entertainment industry, and yung products ito syempre ay exported and watched then not only in Nigeria but in neighboring countries as well. Second largest economy in the continent is South Africa, 360 billion, followed by Egypt with 300 billion, Algeria with 170, Morocco with 120, Kenya 99 billion, Angola 92 billion as well, Ethiopia 91 billion, Ghana 67 billion, and Tanzania 62 billion. Now, in terms of human geography, we'll end with the lot of issues that the continent is facing, its populations are facing, and these will be further elaborated as we go near the end of the semester. So, ayan, political stability, it's a very huge concern dahil marami pong cases ng political upheavals, ng pagpapalit ng mga leaders, ng pag-change ng political system sa continent. We also have a lot of conflicts, no? Mga insurgencies, yung existence ng ilang terrorist groups, no? Mostly ethnic yung conflict ng ethnic yung origin ng conflict. Have the widespread poverty as well. Ayan. So there are certain parts of the continent where food is very inaccessible, water is inaccessible, and a lot of children die of hunger, malnutrition, and other diseases caused by lack of adequate nutrition. Dito din yung neo-colonial influences, no, where the traces of the colonial past of the continent still haunts it today. So a lot of foreign companies invest on very invasive and destructive industries such as mining, which would deteriorate din, no, yung ecosystems na mostly ay source of food and livelihood ng maraming mga Africans, no? And yung pagpapatuloy na exploitation of natural and human resources despite us being in the 21st century. So these are just a few of the issues that the continent face, and I look forward to expanding the discussion of these things as we go along the other topics. Okay, so that's all. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something.